Gas prices are 3 cents lower in Western PA this week, averaging out at $3.47 per gallon. That's according to AAA East Central's latest gas price report. The national average for a gallon of gas is up a penny over the last week to $3.21. Today's national average is 14 cents less than a month ago and 61 cents less than a year ago. The average price you can expect to pay here in Beaver County is currently $3.50. Vice presidential nominees J.D. Vance and Tim Walz have used their time on the debate stage to focus the bulk of their attacks not on one another, but on those at the top of their rival tickets. Republican Vance and Democrat Walz both sought to project themselves as genial opponents as they lobbed criticism at Harris and Trump, respectively. With the Mideast in turmoil, the two vice presidential candidates offered different approaches towards foreign policy. Walz promised steady leadership under Harris, while Vance pledged a return to peace through strength if Trump is returned to the White House. The two running mates agreed that the number of migrants in the U.S. illegally is a problem, but each laid the blame on the opposing presidential nominee. A historic ocean liner that ferried immigrants, Hollywood stars, and the heads of state may soon find its final resting place at the bottom of the Gulf of Mexico. That's after a Florida county inked a deal to buy the storied but aging ship and turn it into the world's largest artificial reef. The contract, approved Tuesday by officials in Okaloosa County, Florida, is contingent upon the resolution of court-imposed mediation. A judge ordered the SS United States to vacate its berth at a pier in Philadelphia following a years-long dispute over rent dockage fees. And the Department of General Services Bureau of Vehicle Management announced that more than 300 used vehicles, including more than 90 retired state police vehicles, will be up for public purchase at the October Commonwealth Vehicle Auction. The auction is open to the public and will take place on Tuesday, October 8th at 10 a.m. in Grantville. Vehicle offerings will include a variety of four-wheel drive SUVs, utility vehicles, pickup trucks, all-wheel drive sedans, minivans, and more. The auction will also feature numerous vehicles seized by state law enforcement agencies. An in-person preview of the vehicles begins tomorrow and will run through Sunday, October 6th.
Here's the Beaver County forecast on 95.7 and 99.3 FM, along with 1230 WBVP, 1460 WMBA, and streaming at beavercountyradio.com.
Cloudy through mid-morning, then gradually clearing. We'll see a high near 67. Clear skies tonight will drop down to a low around 46. We could see some early morning patchy fog tomorrow. Otherwise, it'll be mostly sunny. Look for a high near 74 and an overnight low around 51. A beautiful sunny day in the forecast for Friday. We'll reach a high of 77 and a low around 52. And more sunshine expected on Saturday. We'll see highs in the mid-70s and a low around 51. I'm Lisa Marie with your Beaver County weather.
On this Wednesday, October the 2nd of 2024, at 10 minutes past 10, we've got a temperature of 69 degrees with cloudy skies in Beaver County. That's news. I'm Curtis Walsh on 99.3 FM and AM 1230 WBVP, also streaming at beavercountyradio.com.
Teleforum is on the air on Beaver County Radio, 99.3 FM and 1230 WBVP. The show is presented by East Rochester and Tusca Shop and Saves. And now, here is the host of the show, Eddie Crow.
Wait. Sometimes people really like to hear the off-air conversations. What were you going to say? Ann's with me. And Dan is with me, Judge Dan Viscuso, magisterial. Okay, you're a judge. You know what your job is. How do you say that word? Magisterial? Magisterial. So I'm okay with it. And Ann is with me again. We've talked before. Ann COLELLA-MURRAY. It is Domestic Violence Awareness Month. And Ann, I hate that we have to keep talking about this, but we have to keep talking about this, don't we?
It's not going away, for sure. There's a lot of resources that are available today that maybe weren't available before for people, but we have our fair share of people who are still currently involved in domestic violence, recently left domestic violence situations, long-term survivors of domestic violence. we just have to get to a point where it's unacceptable in our society.
Is it, I don't want to say getting better, is it getting less horrible? You say there are new programs. Well, first off, define it for me, because people have a really simplistic view when they think about what maybe their definition of domestic violence is. Define it.
I always want people to think about domestic violence as more than just being physically hit. Most people are well aware that physical abuse within relationships is wrong. What people are less aware of is the impact of emotional abuse, sexual abuse that occurs in relationships, even long-term relationships, verbal abuse that occurs for individuals. Be mindful that there's often children in homes where there's domestic violence. They are a secondary victim of violence. They're not, they don't have the resources, or they don't have the ability to leave the situation. So we have to think of,
how often does that happen when somebody wants to get out, but they financially just can't?
Oh, I think it happens a lot.
Yeah.
I mean, housing is expensive. We know that. We know that oftentimes individuals who are victims of domestic violence aren't even allowed, per se, to have their own income coming in. We know that oftentimes the assets that a family holds are only in the abusive partner's name. So there's a number of reasons why financially people are struggling to get out of domestic violence situations.
And COLELLA-MURRAY is my guest. Judge Dan VISCUSO is my guest. How often does a court case come up in front of you involving domestic violence?
They're weekly. I mean,
Weekly.
domestic violence cases, throughout the county, they're I believe before the courts daily, if not for sure weekly.
Is it, well, obviously it's not. Why is it so difficult? Are there red flags that you're missing in the home dealing with it? Are there red flags that other people are missing?
I think a lot of times in relationships, early in relationships, friends and family see things that they're concerned about. They may bring them to the victim, and the victim ignores them or overlooks them or believes that they have the ability to change their partner. Just some of the things that are really very concerning early in relationships is jealousy. We know that jealousy, in order to establish trust in a relationship, it takes time to get to that. But we also know that that should be the goal for people, to learn to establish trust in their relationships. So jealousy, not only of somebody that they feel is a rival of theirs, but also jealousy of their own children. We see jealousy of their own children. We see jealousy of
Time spent.
With family and friends.
Okay.
Anytime the attention is not on the abusive partner, there tends to be a sense of jealousy. Anytime we see situations where a partner is trying to isolate a victim, and when I say isolate, I mean we hear of cases that are literally isolating somebody by taking part of a car so that they don't have access to driving the car. They may take somebody's cell phone. They may literally move to a location where they're away from family and friends. But we also know that they oftentimes will try to create tension between a victim and their support systems. No abusive partner wants their partner to have the support of family and friends, because that helps a person to establish confidence. It helps that person to get out of the situation. It helps that person to realize that what's happening to them isn't okay. But we also know that it's difficult for family and friends to bring to the attention of the victim that there is red flags that they're seeing without putting the victim in a defensive position. In other words, if I say to my sister, I don't like what he's doing, he's
That
not good for
guy's
you.
trouble.
Yeah, it's much more effective to say to the victim, I'm concerned about you. I'm worried about your safety. You don't seem happy. You're not spending time with other people outside of your relationship. Those kinds of things are difficult for people to defend. That puts the focus on the victim instead of the victim having to defend why they're still with the abusive partner.
Judge, I'm curious, when these cases come up in front of your court, how often is it, I love this person, I'm going to make them change? How often does somebody come up and then soft pedal what the charges are in defense of the person getting prosecuted?
To put a number on that, I don't know if there's an exact number, how many times, but that is quite frequently we see that because at some point in time there was an attraction between the two. There was something that drew them together. Either it was the physical attraction, some sort of emotional attraction, and people often resort back to that feeling that they had.
You mentioned, and you mentioned often kids are involved. I would guess more than half the time, or am I guessing wrong?
Again, like I don't
kids
have a
in the
number,
house. Okay.
but there's oftentimes kids involved. There's kids involved sometimes from that they share custody of, that they're kids together. There may be kids from a previous relationship that are involved in the situation. But what we know is that when kids are living in homes where there's domestic violence, they oftentimes take the responsibility for the violence. When I'm out doing a program,
explain that.
When I'm out doing a program in a school and I'm talking to kids about hearing a disagreement or an argument between their parents, all parents have arguments and disagreements over their children. We argue and disagree about forms of punishment. We argue and disagree about whether they're doing well enough in school or whether they're being lazy or whether they're doing household chores that they need to do. But when there's domestic violence in a situation, the argument may have started as a typical family argument, but it may escalate into a violent situation. So kids hold the responsibility for the violence. They don't realize that somebody else's parent comes home and because the kid got bad grades, it doesn't result in violence between the parents. So while the argument may have started rooted because of the child, obviously other families have the same argument. It doesn't resort in violence.
Do you see character traits of abusers, consistent character traits? Judge, do you see that in court, personality similarities when those cases come up?
I think that's a tough one to say that there's personality traits. Obviously, every case is individual based on the people involved. So to say that there's traits, there's behaviors, obviously a lot of the actions are the same. You see the same type of abuse, but I don't know if it's attributed to the trait of the individual or if that's there's just certain ways to affect domestic violence.
There's a statistic that I'll share with you that this doesn't provide a lot of comfort for people. When we look at abusive partners, 51% of them grew up witnessing abuse in their own homes.
Okay.
But that means that 49% of them didn't. Those numbers aren't 90 and 10. So there's not just because somebody witnesses violence doesn't mean they'll repeat violence. At the same time, somebody who grew up violent-free in a home free of violence doesn't necessarily mean that they'll repeat that cycle of obviously healthy communication. So those numbers are too close together. 51 and 49% are too close together for us to make any kind of feel any sense of comfort in those numbers.
Those numbers indicate that for some, growing up in that, is that just viewed as that's how it is, that's the norm?
We do know that when we talk to kids do repeat that kind of language. They say, how else would we solve a problem? It's just normal. That's how people live. They can't even imagine cases. I always tell the story. We had a little girl in our shelter, 9 years old, and when the counselor asked her, how would you describe a healthy relationship? She couldn't even answer that. She didn't have any idea. She saw that through her grandparents, through family and friends, and it just was a environment that she was used to seeing violence occur.
And that becomes the norm.
That becomes the norm.
Now, how do you address the 49% of the people that didn't grow up seeing that and that potentially seeping in as the norm? Is that environment? Are those psychological issues? Because you've seen every version of this.
I don't know if I have a good answer for that. I don't know. I think that part of the answer is that we start younger and younger teaching kids to handle conflicts without using violence. That has to be, because it doesn't just start when you are a teenager and you get into a relationship. You could talk to teachers, and we know this. You talk to a teacher, and a teacher will say, a kid could be in kindergarten, and a teacher will say, we're going to see this kid over and over again. He's going to be a problem ongoing.
He's somebody that he or she we're going to get to know them.
Yeah, I mean I'm sure that Dan would agree that there are families where there's repeat violence within. So how do you escape that? If you're witnessing that over and over and over again, how do you walk away from that?
How do you?
Well, I think intervention.
Besides the work that you do and the women's shelter and the helplines and all of that, how do you convince somebody?
I think we have to not ignore the fact that kids, you hear the line over and over, kids are resilient. They're resilient, but that doesn't mean that they don't need intervention. We have therapists. We have two licensed child therapists who are able to work with children who are victims of sexual assault or child witnesses to domestic violence. A really beneficial program that we have to offer right now is that those therapists have the ability to go into the schools and work with kids, have individual appointments within the school. Obviously, that involves parental consent, and the school has to be on board to provide the site location for that to occur. But that's really beneficial for people who can't get to the center, who maybe their work hours don't allow. So to have a therapist being able to come into the school while the kid's in the midst of their school day is beneficial.
That's not, the kids aren't worried that might be stigmatizing?
It's very, I guess, secretive. Discreet
okay.
Is the word. Yeah, I mean, it would be a situation where they would call the kid out of the classroom through whatever, depends on the age of the child, obviously. Nobody knows that the child is going to see a therapist.
Okay.
It's just very discreet.
Their friends aren't. Okay.
No.
Dan VISCUSO, he's the judge, New Brighton Magisterial District Judge, and COLELLA-MURRAY with the violence. It's the month, Domestic Violence Awareness Month. You're the Violence Intervention Coordinator. I got lots more questions. Get the news first. It's Teleforum on Beaver County Radio.
Tune in to Beaver County Radio after the Friday night football game for the 35th anniversary season of Falcone's Moon Township Ford Wrap-Up Show. Beaver County Radio's Bruce Fry and Ryan Garazunis will have the scores, standings, and any news from the games. They will also take your phone calls so you can talk about your favorite team. The Falcone's Moon Township Ford Wrap-Up Show is being brought to you by Carver Construction, the St. Barnabas Health System, Beaver County Career and Technology Center, Falcone's Moon Township Ford, the YMCA, the Beaver Falls Municipal Authority, Patriot Home Care, Keystone Wellness Program, Fry Transportation Group, Freedom United Federal Credit Union, the Community College of Beaver County, Friendly Federal Credit Union, Fat Boy Cigars, Geneva College, and Beaver County Radio.
Tune in to Driving in the Fast Lane with Frank Sparks on 99.3 FM and 1230 WBVP, Monday through Friday from 6:30 to 9 a.m. Frank will talk about what's happening in the news, locally, regionally, and nationally. There's also music to get you started for the day, and Curtis Walsh will have the news. The show is brought to you by Patriot Home Care, so set your radio dial to 99.3 FM and 1230 WBVP. We're streamed live on BeaverCountyRadio.com, so you can listen every morning on Beaver County Radio.
Beaver County Radio, your hometown radio station. You're listening live from the Fry Transportation Studios. Beaver County Radio and Fry Transportation, proud to call Beaver County home.
Tune in to Beaver County Radio after the Friday night football game for the 35th anniversary season of Falcone's Moon Township Ford Wrap-Up Show. Beaver County Radio's Bruce Fry and Ryan Garazunis will have the scores, standings, and any news from the games. They will also take your phone calls so you can talk about your favorite team. The Falcones Moon Township Ford Wrap-Up Show is being brought to you by Carver Construction, the St. Barnabas Health System, Beaver County Career and Technology Center, Falcones Moon Township Ford, the YMCA, the Beaver Falls Municipal Authority, Patriot Home Care, Keystone Wellness Program, Fry Transportation Group, Freedom United Federal Credit Union, the Community College of Beaver County, Friendly Federal Credit Union, Fat Boy Cigars, Geneva College, and Beaver County Radio.
Here at Beaver County Radio, 1230 WBVP and 1460 WNBA, we just love giving away prizes and making winners out of our listeners on a regular occurrence. If you'd like a complete list of the WBVP and WNBA prize contest rules, just visit beavercountyradio.com.
The Pitt Panthers are looking to rebound from a dismal 2023. Follow the Panthers as Beaver County Radio will broadcast select games throughout the season. University of Pittsburgh football on Beaver County Radio is brought to you by Beaver Falls Municipal Authority, East Rochester and Tusca Shop and Saves, the True Value Hardware, inside East Rochester Shop and Save, Dr. C. Timothy Lip, Tri-State Sporting Arms, Geneva College, Beaver Falls Athletic Department, the Fry Transportation Group, and Beaver County Radio.
If you own a company or a small business, you might have considered advertising on radio. It's smart because radio is still the most far-reaching media outlet today. WBVP and WMBA can get you results. Get more information at beavercountyradio.com.
Tune into the Coach's Corner every Wednesday night from 7 to 8 p.m. The show is hosted by Mike Kazadian and John Parado and will feature a local coach each week. The show will be video streamed live on the Beaver County Radio Facebook page and YouTube channel. The Coach's Corner is being brought to you by Carver Construction, the St. Barnabas Health System, the Beaver County Career and Technology Center, Falcones Moon Township Ford, the YMCA, the Beaver Falls Municipal Authority, Patriot Home Care, Keystone Wellness Program, Fry Transportation Group, Freedom United Federal Credit Union, the Community College of Beaver County, Friendly Federal Credit Union, Fat Boys Cigars, Geneva College, and Beaver County Radio.
It's time to kick off the Flex Steel Fall Gallery Sale at AK Nahas. Get the comfort, quality, and style you want and save up to 20% off all Flex Steel furniture. Handcrafted for long-lasting beauty and comfort, choose from over 60 Flex Steel styles, the largest selection in Western Pennsylvania. Shop now and save up to 20% off Flex Steel. Get 12 months special financing and free local delivery. The Fall Gallery Sale, only at AK Nahas, appliance, furniture, mattress, and TV. You'll do okay with AK. Geneva College Golden Tornadoes football is back on Beaver County Radio for a special selection of games that will air throughout the season. Geneva football on Beaver County Radio is brought to you by the Beaver Falls Municipal Authority, Fry Transportation Group, Tri-State Sporting Arms, True Value Hardware in the East Rochester Shop and Save, Dr. C. Timothy Lip, the Beaver Falls Athletic Department, East Rochester and Tusca Shop and Save, Geneva College, and Beaver County Radio.
Beaver County Radio's news source, 95.7 and 99.3 FM, along with 1230 WBVP, 1460 WMBA, and streaming at beavercountyradio.com. Here's Curtis Walsh.
Good morning on this Wednesday, October the 2nd of 2024. We can expect sunny skies today, reaching a high of about 68 degrees. We'll have a closer look at the Beaver County forecast after we take this look at news. PennDOT has announced that lane restrictions have been extended for the Rochester-Monaca Bridge. Single-lane alternating traffic will continue as needed between the hours of 9 a.m. and 3 p.m. weekdays through late November. Crews will be conducting pier work, downspout work, and other miscellaneous construction. Republican presidential candidate Donald Trump is returning this weekend to the town where an assassin's bullet grazed his ear in July. The assassination attempt on the former president was felt deeply in Butler County. Trump enjoys wide support there, and many are expecting a large crowd at the farm show property west of town, but there's also some apprehension and fear. Residents say they have a sense that Butler's wounds are still healing. Kim Geyer, a Butler County commissioner, says that she won't let her mixed emotions keep her away from Saturday's rally. A man in Beaver Falls is victim of check washing, in which a check has a stolen signature after eliminating its information by someone who wants to fraud that information and take it for themselves. Ralph Dyson discovered that 2 checks below $10 were cashed for just over $1,600. Dyson's bank, First National, is responsible for getting the refunds from the check washing incident. And somebody got lucky in New Brighton. A winning treasure hunt lottery ticket worth just over $137,000 was sold at the Brighton Health Mart Pharmacy. 2 winners, one from Beaver County and one from Montgomery County, will be splitting the prize of $137,979. Police confiscated an airsoft gun from a Moon Area middle school student Monday after the student took the gun on a school bus. According to Moon Area Superintendent Barry Belaski, discipline for the student will be determined by school leaders based on the school's code of conduct. Belaski also noted that officers figured out this incident was isolated and there was no safety threat. This comes after an incident last month in which a Moon Area high school student was found with a weapon. The Pennsylvania State Police announced the number of firearm purchase denials and subsequent investigations for the third quarter of 2024. The Pennsylvania Instant Check System is used by county sheriffs, chiefs of police, and licensed firearm dealers to determine an individual's legal ability to acquire a license to carry firearms or obtain a firearm through a purchase or transfer. When an individual attempts to provide false information on a state or federal form, an investigation is initiated and an investigation referral is sent to the corresponding law enforcement agency. Out of nearly 252,000 checks, just over 3,700 resulted in denial, and 29 individuals were arrested for a warrant at the point of purchase. And Secretary of the Commonwealth Al Schmidt is reminding registered Pennsylvania voters who want to vote by mail that they have until 5 p.m. on October 29th to apply for their ballot for the November 5th general election, ensuring that elections are conducted securely, freely, and fairly, and that every eligible voter can make their voice heard are top priorities of the Shapiro administration. When voters receive their mail ballot, they are told to do the following: read instructions carefully, fill out the ballot properly following instructions on how to mark their candidate selections, seal the ballot in the yellow secrecy envelope, seal that envelope in the larger outer return envelope, and sign and write the current date on the voter's declaration on the larger envelope.
Here's the Beaver County forecast on 95.7 and 99.3 FM. Along with 1230 WBVP, 1460 WMBA, and streaming at beavercountyradio.com.
Cloudy through mid-morning, then gradually clearing. We'll see a high near 67. Clear skies tonight will drop down to a low around 46. We could see some early morning patchy fog tomorrow. Otherwise, it'll be mostly sunny. Look for a high near 74 and an overnight low around 51. A beautiful sunny day in the forecast for Friday. We'll reach a high of 77 and a low around 52. And more sunshine expected on Saturday. We'll see highs in the mid-70s and a low around 51. I'm Lisa Marie with your Beaver County weather.
On this Wednesday, October the 2nd of 2024, at 35 minutes past 10, we've got a temperature of 59 degrees with cloudy skies in Beaver County. That's news. I'm Curtis Walsh on 99.3 FM and AM 1230 WBVP, also streaming at beavercountyradio.com.
Talk about what's happening in Beaver County or around the world on Teleforum. 724-843-1888. 724-774-1888. It's Teleforum with Eddie Crow.
It is indeed that 25 minutes till 11 o'clock, live from the Fried Transportation Group studio. And COLELLA-MURRAY is with me, and Dan VISCUSO, that is the Violence Intervention Coordinator, and it's Domestic Violence Awareness Month, so we're making people aware. Judge VISCUSO, New Brighton Magisterial District Judge. I'm going to get to you, Judge, in just a second because I want to talk about PFAs. But, Ann, simplify this for me because it seems like I'm just making it too difficult or maybe too naive. Why is it so difficult for people, once they realize they are in an abusive relationship, what makes it so difficult across the board for them to get out, especially with the services that you provide?
I think everybody's reasons differ. If you have children involved, that makes it difficult. When I think about kids who are leaving domestic violence, we see a ton of kids in our shelter every year. They've left behind everything. They left behind their dad. They've left behind their home. They've left behind their friends, their dog, their school,
their
oftentimes.
life.
Their whole life.
Yeah.
Everything is, and they have no control over what's going on. It wouldn't be uncommon for them to be returning back home. We know that when domestic violence victims leave their situation, they don't leave one time. It's very rare for somebody to leave one time. It's much more common for them to leave 6, 7, 8 times before they end the relationship.
Can I ask why? It seems like the first step would be the toughest, and if you accomplish that.
The first step, usually the first step is never leaving. The first step could be as simple as just reaching out to the helpline and finding out what's available. People, we never, and I could say this without hesitation, we never have people call the helpline the first time they were hit. The first time they're hit, it's always the same scenario. I'm sorry, I love you, I promise I won't do it again. I'll quit drinking, I'll go to counseling, I will cut back in my work hours, whatever they need to say.
And it's got nothing to do with the reality. That's just the abuser trying to smooth things over.
Well, I think the first time that the abuser hits somebody, they themselves believe that they're not going to do it again. And you can convince yourself, you could certainly convince the other person who wants to hear that. The reality is that it's probably not going to be the last time. Once somebody crosses the line into hitting somebody, it's hard to go back. You can't unring the bell. They clearly are going to use that as a way to manipulate and get what they want in the situation. The violence, what we know is the longer the relationship goes on, the violence becomes more severe and it becomes more frequent. So let's say they've been married for a year and there was one incident of violence. In the second year of marriage, maybe there's 4 incidents. Going into the third year, and I'm making these numbers up, but what I want you to understand is that it does increase and it becomes more violent the longer the relationship goes on. When people reach out to us for the first time, they've been in that situation for a while, typically, and they don't know what resources are available. Financial reasons keep them there. Lack of family support, because now the family's tired of supporting somebody who's going back and forth in the relationship. Family and friends get frustrated in the sense of, I don't understand why they don't just pack up their bag and leave. Mm-hmm. It's typically not that simple. We know that they're still in love with the abusive partner, which is a huge part of it. They're not always abusive. We also know that it's incredibly dangerous to leave abusive partners. When we look at statistics around, and these are national statistics of domestic violence homicides relating to domestic violence, 74% of the people that are killed by their partners are killed after they've left. So that sends a huge message to people that I better stay. It's going to be more dangerous for me to get out. When we talk to law enforcement in the community, they often will tell stories of these people aren't even living together. He's coming back into the situation. He's picking up the kids. So they're out of the situation somewhat, but the violence is still.
But there's still a connection where that could happen. Well, I want to ask you, Judge, before you were a judge, you were a law enforcement official. Explain what a PFA is, when it's a good idea, and why doesn't it work from time to time? You see those stories of PFAs taking out, something bad happens. You're seeing both sides of it now, as former law enforcement and now as a judge.
Right, so the PFA obviously is only as good as the paper is written on if the individual's not going to report the violation of the act. So obviously the PFA may state you're not to have any contact directly, indirectly.
But if the court doesn't get told that, they don't know it was violated.
Right, so if they're not reporting the violation to the local police, the state police, it can't be enforced. So the most important thing to remember when the PFA is issued is that the act has to be reported promptly, or the violation needs to be reported immediately upon issuance of the order.
As law enforcement, what percentage of your calls were domestic disputes? Did you have one a day? Because I've got family that are law enforcement, and they said those were the ones they didn't want to go to.
Right, and obviously I think you would base it on municipality.
Okay.
There's some agencies that may see a domestic call once a month, and then there's other places that you are responding to them daily. Obviously not the same household, but with the dependent on the area in which they police. Does
there have to be criminal charges if somebody wants to file a PFA and go to court and get that?
No, the criminal charges. Yeah, criminal charges is not a prerequisite to have a PFA issued. Obviously,
can you have a PFA issued? Let's say me and my boss don't get along.
No.
What justifies to the court? Yes, you need a PFA, or we're going to issue one.
Okay. The simplest way to examine that would be it has to be some sort of domestic partner in some sort of physical sexual relationship, living with that person. It could be a past boyfriend, girlfriend, husband, wife. It doesn't have to be a current, but again, there has to be some sort of intimate physical relationship between the plaintiff and the defendant.
What's the difference between a protection from abuse order and an emergency PFA?
So an emergency PFA is generally issued at once the courthouse is closed. They would come to the district court. The magisterial district judge would review the evidence being presented, and the emergency order is generally good for 12 to 24 hours. Obviously, if you're going in to the weekend, an emergency order could potentially last for up to 3 days.
So the emergency order is to get an order out and keep it out until a permanent one can be set?
Or a temporary one.
Temporary,
so,
okay.
Yeah, so if a plaintiff would come to the court and say the local judge would issue the emergency order, that individual still has to follow up with the Court of Common Pleas the next business day. So if you came in this afternoon at, say, 2:30 in the afternoon and an order was issued, that individual would need to be at the courthouse the next morning at 8 o'clock seeking a temporary order.
All right. Ann, you mentioned something earlier, and I know about it because you've told me before. Talk for a second about the services provided by the Women's Center of Beaver County. The phone number, first off, is 724-775-0131. But if people are looking for help and they're not sure what kind of help, what do you provide for them?
I always tell people the best starting point for people is often through the helpline. People can remain anonymous. They can seek services, find out what is available to them, and at that point, they decide how they want to move forward.
Okay.
I would also want to throw out the information that we're a sexual assault and domestic violence center, so we serve, it's a dual center. How people come to us, there's a variety of ways that people could be accessing services. People think of us as the shelter, and we know that that's a common misconception that that's all we provide. That's actually the smallest number of people that we serve, is the people who are actually in the shelter. Our shelter is equipped to handle, we have bed space for 24 individuals. And
how often is it full?
Almost always. It's very common for us to be to capacity.
What happens then? Waiting list or different facilities pointed out?
We do have a waiting list at times. We also would call upon neighboring shelters, Lawrence County, Butler County, and Allegheny County, if we needed to shelter somebody for emergency safety reasons. We also have put people in hotels when necessary. And one thing we found out through COVID was people don't really want to be in the hotel. They want to be in the shelter because they provide case management while they're there. They have the support of other people who are in similar situations. And it's it's just a more homey atmosphere for people. Talking about the PFAs at the courthouse, we have 4 advocates who are daily at the courthouse, working with individuals who are either involved with a sexual assault case that they're part of, or who are obtaining a PFA. So those advocates are there daily working with individuals. We have 5 total licensed therapists at the center, 3 of which work with adult clients, and 2 which are the child therapists that I had mentioned before. We also have a children's counselor who works with the kids who are just in the shelter. That's her job, is primarily with the children in shelter. And any of the services that we provide are all free of cost. There's no cost affiliated with any of the services that we provide. As I mentioned, the shelter is really the smaller number of people that we serve, but I think it's important that people realize that when they're in shelter, they have access to counseling, therapy, the court advocates, case manager, so they're going to really encompass all of their needs while they're in the shelter. We also have a 24-hour on-call, which is available to the police department, to the hospital, schools, doctors' offices, anywhere where another professional is working with a domestic violence or sexual assault victim, who easily could hand them a brochure with our information, but feels that it would be more beneficial for somebody to come out and sit with the victim at that moment. So in other words, let's say a police department were interviewing somebody who were sexually assaulted, we can go out and sit in with the interview. If somebody's brought in the hospital as a result of domestic violence injuries, the hospital would call us to sit in while that person is in the emergency room.
Does the doctor or hospital have to get permission from the patient?
They do.
Because HIPAA rules, right?
They do have to,
Okay.
and we want it to be that way.
Sure.
We don't want it to be a situation where somebody's surprised by our presence. That's not fair to somebody. But that service is a nice service because it's going to be an intervention at the time of the crisis, rather than waiting 3 or 4 days for somebody to possibly pick up and call the helpline.
It is Teleforum. Ann is my guest, Ann COLELLA-MURRAY with the Women's Shelter, and she's the Violence Intervention Coordinator. Judge Dan VISCUSO is also my guest. October is Domestic Violence Awareness Month. When somebody gets charges filed, Judge, what becomes your job at that point? What are your options at that point?
So when the charges are filed, obviously we, as the rule that we have to, one, authorize the charges that are coming before the court. From there may be a warrant that is issued for the accused. And once they are apprehended, or once the individual is in custody, our next role would be then setting up a preliminary hearing date for the accused, going over the preliminary hearing, what it is, where it occurs, as well as setting a bond in that for that case.
And judges are impartial because that's the job. Is it more difficult to be impartial when it involves physical violence of a spouse or sexual abuse?
No, I don't know that it's a difficult decision. Obviously, there's things that you may hear or may see that are alarming to you, but you still have to hold to the oath that you took. You're gonna be fair and impartial, and you're gonna make a decision based on what evidence is presented to the court.
Are we getting better at talking about something we don't like to talk about, Ann? Domestic Violence Awareness Month. This is not something that started happening 5-10 years ago. This has gone on since the beginning of time. Are we getting better at buffering ourselves and being able to talk about it?
I think we are. I think that even our local schools are doing a really good job at providing violence prevention programs to their students. Obviously, the programming that we would do with a second grader doesn't equate to the programs we would do with a senior who may be involved in a relationship and who may be a potential victim or perpetrator of dating violence. But I think that all of, as time goes on, we become more comfortable talking about mental health issues, domestic violence, sexual assault, drug and alcohol. It's to everybody's benefit. It really, for us to remove the stigma around any social problems that are out there, is a benefit to everybody. It shouldn't be a secret. I mean, it's not something you scream from the
You're
rooftop.
right, but the stigma that you talk about and the embarrassment, I'd rather shoulder this myself than everybody know.
I think that just allowing people, giving people the green light to seek services is a step in the right direction. You don't have to tell everybody what's going on behind closed doors, but seek the services that are necessary to make some changes.
Is there an age window where this is more prevalent? Is it younger couples or younger relationships, or is it older, or is it across the board?
Well, this is a statistic that is alarming for people to realize, and this gives you a sense of where, when you talk to domestic violence victims, 25% of domestic violence victims experience violence during pregnancy. So
are you kidding me?
No, I'm not kidding. There is a definite correlation between a younger victim, childbearing years.
Right.
I'm not saying we don't see older women in our facility, but the majority of people that we see in our facility are younger. They're younger, and they have young children with them.
All right. Your facility, Women's Center of Beaver County, the 24-hour helpline and case management and counseling and therapy and emergency shelter and on-call accompaniment, all of that's offered. 724-775-0131. October is Domestic Violence Awareness Month. Is there anything I should have asked you, and that I didn't?
No, I think we covered everything we really wanted to get out there.
All right.
Just letting people know that the services are there and they're confidential. And again, I would stress the importance of just calling, remaining anonymous if that's what they're comfortable with, and just finding what's available.
If you can get a person to make that first call, even if they call anonymously, what do you think the chances are that there's going to be a second call, that they're actually going to engage in what the Women's Center offers?
I'm always encouraged by the fact that somebody reaches out, because when somebody reaches out, what that tells me is they know what's going on is wrong.
Okay.
It's when we have people who, we within domestic violence agencies talk about the person who no longer apologizes for the violence. In those cases, what we know is going on is that the abusive partner doesn't need to apologize. They're convinced that the victim isn't going anywhere. So
they went from, oh my gosh, I'll never do that again, to I'm allowed to do this.
Yeah, they're not going to leave.
Judge, is there anything I should have asked you that I didn't ask you?
No, sir. I think we covered everything quite well. And I appreciate you taking the time and allow us to be part of this this interview today.
And you told me off the air you've been a judge 9 months?
Just 9 months, yes.
All right. How's it going?
It's going quite well. I'm enjoying the position. I'm learning. I love the interaction that I get to have with the community. I'm hoping that in this role I am impacting someone in a positive way and changing the views that some people have. Hopefully.
Judge Dan VISCUSO is my guest, and COLELLA-MURRAY, my guest. October is Domestic Violence Awareness Month. And the phone number one more time, maybe for you, maybe for somebody you know. The Women's Center of Beaver County, 724-775-0131. Guys, you can come back anytime you want, and we'll talk about this.
We appreciate it. Thank you.
Always.
Charlie and the Chocolate Factory, the musical, arrives at